episode of The Exchange, I speak to Gabby Edlin about period stigma, and Emma Breschi talks about why humour is so important in this conversation. Emma, you're an activist with a powerful voice on social media, and you speak about loads of different subjects, one of those being period stigma. I wonder if you could just tell me why this is an important thing to you.
I find it ridiculous that there even is a stigma about something that's just biological, you know? It's being human, having your period, and being able to take care of yourself during menstruation is a basic human right. And I guess that's why I tend to talk about it a lot. That, and also I love shocking people. I find people funny in general because, like, people are happy to watch a gory movie most of the time and they'll be like, oh yeah, oh, like bloodshed. And then you tell them you've got your period and blood's coming out of your vagina and they're like running for the hills. So it's just, I find that quite interesting. And for me, I think because of the way I am, and because, again, like I said, I like to shock people, I got my period when I was like 13, and straight away with my dad, I'd be like, Dad, I've got my period. And I'd describe everything that was happening to me in like graphic detail. And I think I just, like, a part of me being like quite like a rebellious like teen wanted to shock him, but also discover why it made him feel so uncomfortable to talk about that with his own daughter, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still talking about it now. And I've always been learning about my period throughout my own experiences.
Gabby, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Exchange, where we're discussing period stigma. And I would love you just to talk me through the name of your charity, Bloody Good Period. I mean, I love the name, but where did that come from?
Well, I thought of it when I was on the toilet, as my best ideas tend to come. I just remember being at work when I named it, and when it became a thing. It wasn't even, I wouldn't even call it like a project. It was just, I had put on Facebook, I'm collecting period products and I'm bringing them to this centre. Can anyone help? And so I just thought, I need a name for this. And I've always believed in like comedy as being the main force in how we make change. And so I wanted something that would make people laugh, because obviously it maybe it's less so now, but at the time it was a really uncomfortable subject. It's funny, and I thought you have to say the word period. You know, you just have to, because that's what we're doing. And I didn't want any euphemistic name that was like pink angels or...
I know, words like sanitary and...
Exactly. Feminine hygiene, you know, whispers. Shit, I was just like, I cannot, like, I can't do this. If I'm going to do something interesting and I'm going to do something that's actually going to change things, I need to do something completely different. And really that's sort of where that came from.
People's experience of their education on this subject is really mixed. How did you learn about periods?
It was more something like everyone would just learn from, like, deal with at home with their mom, right? It was like more on a personal level. It wasn't like, and then amongst your friends, you'd be like, I got my period. And some people would be like, ew, or some people would be like, oh my God, I haven't got mine yet. Like, it's so weird. It would just be something personal amongst your own peer groups. And I remember once, like, I literally got my period, and we were at like a swimming class, like a PE swimming class. And my underwear fell out of my bag in the changing room. And a lot of kids were like pointing at it like, oh, look, there's period stain pants over there, and wah, wah, wah. And then I was one of those kids joining in like, yeah, gross. And then someone saw a huge name tag saying Emma Breschi on it, like hand stitched by my mom. And I was like, everyone's like, they're yours, and like absolutely horrified. And then that's kind of like a moment in my own experience where I was like so embarrassed. But what got me through it was kind of early on to deal with it in a more humorous way. I just want to have that open, honest discussion. And I think that's definitely a way to approach it through education as well. I think it's, like I've said this before in another interview, it's just about changing the perspective, because we should never feel ashamed for something that's so human and natural.
What are some of the most important things people need to know when it comes to learning about periods, do you think?
I think that, again, like, people need to understand that periods is just not, it's not just a personal issue. It's a humanitarian crisis. We have to understand that many people don't have access to the proper resources and support they need for when they're on their period, you know, not just in developing countries, but also even within this country, in the UK.
What can we do about that, do you think?
Well, supporting charities like Bloody Good Period, or speaking up to your local MPs, and like starting the conversation. I think people don't realize, you know, power to the people, power to the kids. I mean, this year, if anything, is proving that kids are more vocal than ever, and I think that's a great thing that should be celebrated. If kids are able to protest about their education, they should definitely protest their human rights as someone who menstruates.
Having access to pads and tampons in toilets.
Yeah, and even understanding, even in an environmental through an environmental point of view, understanding the sort of like resources we have now that are more environmentally friendly as well. I think health, like schools, should educate on all the sort of different resources you have available.
Yeah,
that's catered to everyone. Whether, because I know some people are like, oh, I don't like the moon cup. Am I a bad person for not being sustainable with my period? And it's like, no, there are so many alternatives out there that is catered, that you can find, that is catered to you and you feel comfortable about. And I think it's super important to educate people on that as well now, more than ever.
Only half the people in the world will ever menstruate. Why is this equally important for those who don't, to be educated about periods?
Well, I mean, I actually think that we need to understand that, like, not every woman gets their period, and not every female who gets their period identifies as a woman, because we also should understand that, like, there's a lot of people, transgender people, that, you know, transgender men that still get their periods, just as well as a transgender woman might not have their periods. And I think, you know, we should understand that menstruation isn't always just a woman's issue. It's, again, a human issue. And if we can understand that and get kids as well to understand that, then I think that would definitely open up more of an open understanding through education as well.
Gabby, you put the issue of period poverty on the map, I would say. Can you explain briefly what the situation is in the UK?
We still have a really bad situation with poverty in this country, and already poverty is so shamed. You know, I'm not saying it's shameful to be poor, I'm saying it's shamed to be poor. One is shamed. And so you're getting into this big, like, murky soup of shame and silence even more. And that's why people were not able to speak up about not having been able to afford products. Or if they were speaking up, they weren't listened to because it was seen as a women's issue and therefore not important. And so there's still a huge amount of work to do. And, you know, there's a small group of us, charities and projects, initiatives, who are working really hard to not only fill the gap, but to ensure that the government and the businesses start doing something more about it, because this is not a problem that's going to go away. Periods aren't going to go away. They are literally the reason that we all exist. And until poverty is, you know, solved or like relieved, this is not going to change. So the situation is still pretty bloody terrible, no pun intended, but good things are happening and more people are talking about it, which is huge.
There's going to be boys watching this who perhaps have been shut out of that conversation, and I think it's important that we're just as welcoming to anybody that wants to learn about anyone menstruating. And part of that really is just kind of breaking down this stigma and having those really honest conversations. Where do you think a good place to start might be?
There have been so many times when boys and men are shut out of the conversation. They're taken out of the room when it's, the sex talk or the period talk at school. They're separated into talking about usually like wet dreams and erections, while the little girls have to learn about periods. Even just, the adverts. I vividly remember there was a Tampax, like the Compact advert, and the whole premise was all around the fact that your boyfriend wouldn't know what it was. He wouldn't know. He would think it was sugar. He would think it was a biscuit. So yeah, it just needs to be a much more open and easy conversation. And that's not to say there can't be safe spaces for people who menstruate, because I think that's really important as well. But that can't be at the expense of men and non-menstruators not being able to learn.
Agreed. Agreed. If there was one thing that you wanted to say to people watching this, I suppose to encourage them to make period stigma a thing of the past, what would that be?
So I think one of the main things that people would normally say is be open, talk about your period, right? Hold your tampon in the air. Like, that is not easy for everyone. That is just not. And I would hate to force somebody into feeling like they have to do some sort of activism and swinging their tampon around and then feeling, either sort of like really vulnerable or really embarrassed. Actually, I think the most important thing to beat period stigma is monitoring your own reactions to it. So when you see either a period advert that shows real blood, or when you see a tampon sneaking out of somebody's bag, or someone talks about menstrual cramps, you just accept it. And it's up to us in our reactions to basically pave the way for other people to feel comfortable and to end period stigma. And that in turn will work for us as well.
How do you think that we can continue to open up conversation around periods?
I think if we stop thinking that periods are gross, shameful, dirty, then perhaps it would lead to it not being such a humanitarian crisis. We shouldn't have to feel like we need to whisper about periods, about products that we use, and it's not something out of the ordinary. And this, again, should be taught at school to kids, boys and girls. And that's where I hope that education is changing, because I've found as an adult, these conversations now I'm having with adults because of social media, but these conversations I'm having now should have happened when I was younger. Probably would have saved me a lot of trauma as well. and awkward experiences as a teenager.
Part of breaking down the stigma, I think, is definitely having this open dialogue where we can laugh at period stained pants and
I think so.
realize that a lot of the things that we go through are very normal.